The warning klaxons echoed through the crystal corridors of Zephyria. Prime as Admiral Kale rushed toward the communication center. Live, his long robe swept behind him as he moved with urgent purpose through the gleaming halls that had stood unchanged. For 10,000 years, the crystalline beings of his world had always prided themselves on their calm, measured approach to galactic affairs, but today that composure was cracking like ice under pressure. Report, Kale commanded as he entered the central chamber where dozens of his officers worked frantically at their stations. The room hummed with nervous energy as holographic displays showed star charts marked with spreading zones of absolute darkness. Commander. Dex of the Vorth Collective materialized beside him, his telepathic form shimmering with anxiety. We lost contact with the Meridian system 47 minutes ago, he reported, his mental voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic. The last transmission was identical to all the others, screaming, then silence. Kale studied the tactical display with growing dread. Red markers indicated 17 star systems that had gone dark in the past month, each one following the same terrifying pattern. First came the reports of strange ships appearing at the edge of the system. Vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves and move in ways that defied physics. Then the desperate calls for help as these intruders began their systematic destruction. Finally, nothing but empty space where billions of lives had once flourished. Have our scientists made any progress understanding their technology? Asked, though he already knew the answer from the defeated expressions around him. None, replied Dr. Vex, the lead researcher from the Kalari Empire. Her ancient species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But even their vast knowledge seemed useless against this new threat. These entities operate on principles we cannot comprehend. Our weapons pass through their ships, as if they were made of shadow. Our shields offer no protection against their assault. The holographic display updated again, showing another system flickering from blue to red. Kale felt his crystalline form grow cold as he realized the implications. The Void Swarm, as they had come to call this mysterious enemy, was not simply conquering territory, they were erasing it entirely. No refugees escaped their advance. No debris remained after their passage. Care worlds simply ceased to exist. What do we know about their origin? Kale asked, grasping for any information that might help them understand their enemy. They appear from what we can only describe as dark space, Dex responded, his mental projection flickering with uncertainty.
Our deepest.
Dex sensors detect nothing. Until they are already within our systems, they communicate through frequencies that cause madness in most species. The few survivors who have encountered them describe ships that hurt to look at directly, as if reality itself rejects their presence. The chamber fell silent, except for the constant hum of failing defenses and desperate communications from the outer worlds. Kale had commanded fleets in 3 galactic wars, had seen the rise and fall of empires. But nothing had prepared him for an enemy that seemed to exist outside the very laws of nature. Sir, called out Lieutenant Zara from her station. We are receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Put it through, Kale ordered, dreading what he might hear. The image that appeared showed Admiral Corks of the Outer Rim, his usually composed features twisted with terror. Behind him, Kale could see the bridge of his flagship in chaos. Officers running between stations as alarms wailed continuously. Admiral Kale, Corks began, his voice barely controlled. They are here. The Void Swarm has reached the Outer Rim. Our entire fleet is the transmission cut to static. Then slowly, even the static faded to absolute silence. Kale stared at the empty display, feeling the weight of his failure settling on his shoulders like a burial shroud. The Outer Rim Defense Fleet had been composed of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, crewed by the finest officers from a dozen species. If they could not even slow the Void Swarm's advance, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? How long until they reached the core worlds? He asked quietly. Dr. Vex consulted her calculations, her ancient hands trembling as she worked. At their current rate of advance, perhaps 6 standard months, maybe less if they accelerate their expansion. 6 months. In 6 months, the greatest Civilization the galaxy had ever known would be reduced to nothing more than empty space and fading memories. The combined knowledge of thousands of species, the art and culture of countless worlds, the hopes and dreams of trillions of beings, all would be consumed by an enemy they could not understand, could not fight, and could not escape. Convene. The Emergency Council, Kale commanded, his voice heavy with resignation. Contact every member world, every fleet commander, every scientific institution. If there is any hope of survival, any weapon or strategy we have overlooked, we must find it now. As his officers hurried to carry out his orders, Kale remained staring at the tactical display, watching the red zone spread like a cancer across the galaxy. The darkness was coming, and they had no fire to drive it back. Scholar Viren pushed through the dusty corridors of the Kaleri archives, his footsteps echoing in the forgotten depths of the ancient library. The Emergency Council meeting had ended 3 hours ago with nothing but despair and empty promises. Every military leader, every scientist, every strategic mind in the galaxy had gathered to discuss their defense against the Void Swarm. All had reached the same conclusion. They were facing extinction. But Viren refused to accept defeat. Somewhere, in these vast archives, accumulated over 15,000 years of galactic civilization, there had to be something they had missed. Some forgotten weapon, some abandoned technology, some overlooked strategy that could save them all. The deeper sections of the library had not been accessed in centuries. Dust covered everything, and the air recyclers struggled to maintain breathable atmosphere in these neglected chambers. Run's aging form moved slowly between towering shelves filled with data crystals, each one containing the recorded knowledge of worlds that had long since faded from memory. Species Catalog, Section 12. He muttered to himself, running his fingers along the ancient storage units. Quarantined worlds, failed contact attempts, primitive civilizations deemed unsuitable for integration. His hand stopped on a crystal marked with red prohibition seals. The label read simply, Earth, human species, permanent quarantine, do not contact. Viren hesitated. The prohibition seals were not placed lightly. They marked civilizations that the Galactic Council had deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too primitive to be allowed contact with the greater galaxy. But desperate times called for desperate measures. He inserted the crystal into a reader and watched as holographic displays filled the air around him. The file began with standard exploration reports from 3,000 years ago. When the galaxy was still young and eager to welcome new species into their growing alliance, initial contact with species designation, human attempted in cycle. 7,832, the report began. Planet Earth, Sol System, Outer Rim Territory. Species shows early signs of technological development, but demonstrates concerning behavioral patterns. Viren leaned forward, reading the detailed observations that followed. The human species was described as highly aggressive, prone to violence, completely lacking in the cooperative instincts that made galactic civilization possible. They fought constant wars among themselves, destroyed their own environment, and showed no interest in the peaceful advancement of knowledge that other species valued. Recommendation: immediate quarantine, the final report concluded. Human species represents potential threat to galactic stability. Aggressive nature, unpredictable behavior, and dangerous creativity make them unsuitable for integration. Establish monitoring stations but maintain strict non-contact protocols. But as Viren continued reading, he began to notice something the original researchers had missed. Yes, humans were violent and chaotic, but they were also incredibly adaptable. They had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and massive asteroid impacts. They had developed dozens of different cultures and technologies, each suited to their harsh and changing environment. More importantly, they had never given up. Every setback, every disaster, every seemingly impossible challenge had been met with determination and creativity. Where other species might have accepted defeat, humans had found new ways to fight, new solutions to problems, new methods of survival. Fascinating, Viren whispered as he studied their military history. Human warfare was brutal and chaotic, but it was also incredibly effective. They had developed weapons and tactics that more civilized species would never consider. They fought with a desperation and ferocity that made their enemies fear to engage them. As he delved deeper into the files, Varen discovered something else remarkable. Despite their quarantine, humans had not remained stagnant. The monitoring stations had continued to observe their development, and the reports showed steady technological advancement. They had developed space travel, artificial intelligence, and energy weapons. They had even begun to explore beyond their own solar system. They know we exist, Varen realized as he read the latest surveillance reports. They have been preparing for contact, for conflict, for whatever might come from the stars. A new idea began to form in his mind. The Galactic Council had always approached problems with careful planning, measured responses, and civilized cooperation. They used their most advanced technology, their most sophisticated strategies, their most elegant solutions. But the Void Swarm had proven immune to all of their civilized approaches. Perhaps what they needed was not more civilization, but less. Perhaps what they needed was not sophisticated technology, but primitive brutality. Perhaps what they needed was not elegant solutions, but desperate chaos. Varen gathered the data crystals and hurried back through the dusty corridors. The Emergency Council was still in session, though their discussions had devolved into angry arguments about evacuation plans and last-ditch defensive strategies. He burst into the chamber without ceremony, his arms full of forbidden knowledge. "I have found something," he announced, his voice cutting through the heated debate. "A species we abandoned, a world we forgot, a people we dismissed as too primitive, too matter." Admiral Kale looked up from the tactical displays with weary eyes. "Varen, we have no time for historical curiosities. The Void Swarm has consumed 3 more systems while we debate." "These are not historical curiosities," Varen replied, activating his data crystals. "These are our salvation. The humans of Earth may be primitive, but they are also survivors. Fight in ways we would never consider, with weapons we would never build, using tactics we would never employ." He paused, looking around the chamber at the desperate faces of the galaxy's leaders. "Perhaps it is time to contact the species we deem too dangerous for civilized company." The alien stealth ship moved silently through the outer reaches of the Sol system, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to what the crew assumed would be primitive detection systems. Commander Thex studied the blue-green world ahead through the view screen, expecting to find a backward civilization unaware of the greater galaxy beyond their small planet. "Maintain stealth protocols," he ordered his mixed crew of Kalaria Zephyrian and Vorth officers. "We approach a quarantined world. These humans should have no knowledge of our existence." The ship had barely crossed the orbit of the planet's moon when every alarm on the bridge began screaming at once. A ray crackled to life, and a clear voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Unknown vessel, this is Sol Control. You are entering restricted Earth space. Identify yourself immediately, or prepare to be intercepted." Dex stared at the communication panel in shock. "How is this possible?" "Our stealth systems are the most advanced in the galaxy," so reported the Kalari sensor officer. "I am detecting multiple energy signatures approaching our position. They appear to be crude chemical rockets, but they are moving at impossible speeds." Through the view screen, Thex watched as several small craft emerged from the planet's atmosphere, their exhaust trails bright against the darkness of space. The ships were angular and utilitarian, lacking the elegant curves of civilized spacecraft, but they moved with deadly precision. "This is Colonel Minho of the United Earth Defense Force," the voice continued. "We have been monitoring your approach since you entered our system. Please respond or we will consider you hostile." The communications officer looked at Dex with wide eyes. "Sir, how do they know our language?" More importantly, added the tactical officer, "how did they detect us?" Dex made a decision that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. "Open a channel. Full diplomatic protocols." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what appeared to be a military command center. The human who had identified himself as Colonel Minho sat behind a desk, his dark eyes studying the alien visitors with calm intelligence. Behind him, Dex could see other humans working at various stations, their movements efficient and purposeful. "Welcome to Earth," Minho said, his voice carrying no surprise at seeing alien faces. "We have been expecting contact for some time. Please transmit your credentials and the nature of your visit. You have been expecting us," Dex asked, his mental projections flickering with confusion. "Of course," Minho replied. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for over 50 years. We know about the Void Swarm, and we know about your failed attempts to stop them. We assumed someone would eventually come looking for alternatives." The alien delegation exchanged glances. This was not how first contact was supposed to proceed. These humans were supposed to be primitive, terrified, overwhelmed by the revelation that they were not alone in the universe. Instead, they seemed to be treating the situation like a routine military briefing. "Perhaps we should meet in person," Dick suggested, still trying to regain control of the situation. "Agreed," Minho replied. "You may dock at Station 7. Be aware that you will be escorted at all times and monitored constantly. We trust you understand the security concerns." An hour later, Dex found himself in a conference room deep beneath the surface of the planet. The chamber was functional rather than beautiful, with plain metal walls and harsh lighting around. The table sat humans in military uniforms, their faces serious and attentive. General Ginwu, the apparent leader of the Earth Defense Forces, gestured for the aliens to sit. "We have reviewed the intelligence data you transmitted," he began. Without preamble, "Your tactical situation is worse than we initially assessed." "Our situation?" Dex asked. "We came here seeking assistance, not to be lectured." "Then you came to the right place," replied Dr. Biorum, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes. "We have been studying your enemy for months. The Void Swarm operates on principles that your civilized approach cannot counter." Captain Suben activated a holographic display showing detailed analysis of Void Swarm technology. "You keep trying to fight them with advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics," she explained, "but they exist partially outside normal space-time. Your elegant solutions cannot affect something that does not fully exist in your reality." "What do you propose?" asked the Kalari representative. "We do not propose," Jinwu replied. "We act. Lieutenant Hijian, show them the weapons test." The young officer activated another display showing a series of explosions in space. "Kinetic bombardment," she explained. Tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. No exotic particles, no complex technology, just mass and velocity. You cannot seriously suggest that primitive kinetic weapons could succeed. "Where our most advanced technology has failed," Dex protested. "Your advanced technology requires the enemy to follow the same physical laws you do," Dr. Borum replied. "Our primitive weapons work regardless of what laws they follow. A piece of metal moving at high speed will damage anything it hits, whether it exists in normal space or not." The alien delegation sat in stunned silence as the implications sank. These humans were not offering to help with the war. They were offering to fight it for them, using methods that civilized species would never consider. "There is more," Jinwu continued. "We have been developing weapons specifically designed to counter phase shift technology. Our approach is simple. If they can exist partially outside reality, we will make it impossible for them to exist anywhere at all." Dex realized that first contact protocols meant nothing here. These humans had been preparing for war since they first learned of the galaxy's existence. Now they were ready to bring that war to an enemy that had never faced such brutal, direct tactics. The primitive world was about to teach the galaxy how to fight. Deep beneath the mountains of Korea, in facilities that had been hidden from galactic observation for decades, Dr. Kungman worked alongside teams of engineers and scientists who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. Underground complex stretched 4 kilometers, filled with workshops, laboratories, and testing chambers where humanity's greatest minds had been developing weapons that would make their alien visitors deeply uncomfortable. "Show them the kinetic systems first," General Jinwu instructed as he led the delegation of galactic representatives through the secure corridors. The aliens walked in obvious amazement, their advanced sensors detecting technology that operated on principles they had never encountered. Colonel J1 stood before a massive testing chamber. where a tungsten rod no larger than a telephone pole was being loaded into what appeared to be a simple magnetic accelerator. "This is our solution to your phase shift problem," he explained to the watching aliens. "While you have been trying to develop weapons that can hit targets existing in multiple dimensions, we took a different approach." "What approach?" asked Commander Thex, his mental projections flickering with curiosity and concern. "We decided to hit them so hard that it does not matter what dimension they are in." J1 replied simply. The test chamber sealed itself, and the accelerator began to charge. The aliens could feel the massive energy build up through their sensitive equipment. But what disturbed them most was the crude directness of the weapon. There were no elegant energy fields, no sophisticated targeting systems, no complex calculations. Just a piece of metal being accelerated to enormous speeds. "Fire," J1 commanded. The tungsten rod vanished from the chamber in a flash of light. Seconds later, monitors showed the impact site 50 kilometers away, where a mountain peak had simply ceased to exist. The shock wave from the impact registered on seismic equipment across the planet. "Impressive," admitted the Kaleri representative, though his voice carried undertones of horror. "But surely the Void Swarm's ability to phase through matter makes such weapons useless." "That is where you are wrong," said Dr. Borum, leading them to the next demonstration area. "Lieutenant Dong Ho, show them the electromagnetic pulse systems." The young officer activated a device that looked like nothing more than a collection of copper coils and power cells. "The mistake your civilization made was trying to understand how the void swarm phases between dimensions," he explained. "We do not care how they do it. We only care about stopping them from doing it." The device hummed to life, and the alien-sensitive equipment began registering massive electromagnetic disturbances. But these were not the controlled, elegant fields that advanced civilizations used. These were raw, chaotic pulses of energy that seemed to tear at the fabric of space itself. "We cannot create the sophisticated dimensional manipulation that your technology uses," Dong Ho continued. "But we can create localized chaos that makes dimensional manipulation impossible. Think of it as jamming their ability to phase, like jamming a radio signal." The alien delegation watched in fascination as the electromagnetic pulse created visible distortions in the air. Areas where light bent strangely and objects seemed to flicker between states of existence. It was crude, brutal, and completely effective. "This is barbaric," whispered the Zephyrian representative. "You are weaponizing the fundamental forces of reality itself." "Yes," replied Engineer Saw Young matter-of-factly. "What?" "And it works." The final demonstration took place in the deepest part of the complex, where scientist Yunji had been working on what she called her greatest achievement. The chamber was surrounded by warning signs in dozens of languages, most of which roughly translated to danger, reality distortion zone. "This is what we call aggressive entropy acceleration," Yunji explained to the increasingly nervous aliens. "The Void Swarm relies on maintaining ordered dimensional transitions to phase between realities. We introduce maximum possible disorder to their operating space." She activated a device that appeared to be nothing more than a collection of spinning wheels, oscillating pendulums, and randomly firing energy cells. The aliens' equipment immediately began screaming warnings as the local space-time began to fluctuate wildly. "The theory is simple," Youngji continued, raising her voice over the growing chaos. "If they need ordered dimensional space to operate, we give them the most disordered space possible. We are essentially weaponizing the universe's natural tendency toward chaos." The demonstration chamber began to fill with areas of twisted space where the laws of physics seemed to break down completely. Objects appeared and disappeared, gravity pointed in random directions, and time itself seemed to flow at different rates in different areas. "You are insane," the Kaleri representative said, his voice filled with equal parts admiration and terror. "You are fighting physics itself." "We are using physics," corrected Dr. Kungmin. "Your civilizations have spent millennia learning to work with the elegant laws of the universe. We have spent our entire history learning to survive in spite of them." The aliens watched as the chaos weapon was shut down, leaving the chamber scarred and twisted but functional. They were beginning to understand that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Will these weapons work against the Void Swarm?" asked Commander Thex. "We will find out," replied General Jinwoo. "But I can promise you this. They have never faced an enemy that fights like we do. They have never encountered weapons designed by people who do not care about elegant solutions, who do not worry about disturbing the natural order, who are willing to break the universe itself to protect what they love." The aliens left the underground complex with a new understanding of their human allies. These were not the primitive savages their records had described. These were survivors who had turned their harsh world into a forge for creating the impossible. The Kepler system had been the crown jewel of galactic civilization for over 2,000 years. Its massive space stations handled trade from across the galaxy, while its orbital shipyards produced the finest vessels known to any species. Now it was about to become the final battleground between order and chaos. Between the light of civilization and the consuming darkness of the Void Swarm, Captain Tejo stood on the bridge of his modified Earth vessel, watching through the viewscreen. As the combined galactic fleet took defensive positions around the system's primary space station, the crystalline ships of the Zephyrians gleamed like jewels against the darkness. Their elegant forms a testament to thousands of years of advanced engineering. The sleek vessels of the Vorth Collective moved in perfect formation, their telepathic crews coordinating with inhuman precision. The ancient dreadnoughts of the Calri Empire bristled with weapons that had defended the galaxy since before humans had learned to make fire. It was the most magnificent fleet ever assembled. And Tejo knew it would not be enough. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sangho from the tactical station, "enemy contacts detected at the edge of the system. The Void Swarm is beginning to emerge from dark space." Through the viewscreen, Tejo watched as reality itself seemed to tear open. The Void Swarm ships materialized like living nightmares, their forms shifting and changing as they existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that hurt to contemplate. They moved with purpose toward the heart of the system, their dark hulls absorbing light and hope in equal measure. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Jinwoo," came the voice over the communication channel. "Remember your training. Remember why we fight. Remember that sometimes the most primitive solution is the only solution that works." The Galactic Fleet opened fire first, their advanced weapons creating brilliant displays of light and energy. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and dimensional disruptors filled the space between the fleets with deadly beauty. For a few moments, it seemed as though the combined firepower of the galaxy's greatest civilizations might be enough to stop the advancing darkness. Then the Void Swarm began to phase. The elegant weapons of the Galactic Fleet passed harmlessly through the enemy ships as they shifted into dimensions beyond normal space. The careful formations of the Allied forces became meaningless as their targets became untouchable. Within minutes, the Void Swarm had closed to contact range and began their systematic destruction of everything they encountered. Now, Tejo commanded, the human fleet moved forward, but not in the careful formations that military doctrine demanded. Instead, they charged directly into the heart of the Void Swarm formation, their crewed vessels accelerating to dangerous speeds. Behind Tejo, Commander the Jin Squadron prepared for maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. "Units activate entropy weapons," ordered Captain Minseok over the tactical channel. "Maximum chaos deployment on my mark." The first human ship reached the enemy formation and detonated. Scientist Youngji's experimental device at point-blank range. The explosion created a sphere of pure disorder, where the laws of physics became suggestions and dimensional manipulation became impossible. The Void Swarm ships caught within the chaos field suddenly became solid, their ability to phase disrupted by the weaponized randomness. "Kinetic bombardment now," shouted Lieutenant Nari from her weapons station. The tungsten rods launched from hidden positions throughout the system, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by the massive electromagnetic rails that had been secretly installed over the past months. Unlike the sophisticated weapons of the Galactic Fleet, these were nothing more than pieces of metal moving very fast. But they struck the now solid Void Swarm vessels with devastating effect. The enemy ships began to burn. More human vessels charged into the formation. Their crews led by volunteers like Engineer Dongman and Pilot Jae Young, who had accepted missions with no guarantee of return. They detonated their entropy weapons in coordinated strikes, creating overlapping fields of chaos that prevented the Void Swarm from regaining their dimensional advantages. Electromagnetic Pulse, full power, commanded Captain Suben as her ship. Dove through the heart of the enemy formation. The pulse weapons activated across the human fleet, creating massive disturbances in local space-time that made dimensional travel impossible. The Void Swarm found themselves trapped in normal space, forced to fight according to laws of physics they'd never needed to understand. The battle turned into a close-range brawl unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships rammed. Enemy vessels, their crews accepting destruction to ensure their weapons reached their targets. The elegant tactics of civilized warfare gave way to the brutal efficiency of desperate survival. "Sir," reported Sergeant Haijun from the sensor station, "the enemy is beginning to retreat. They're trying to return to dark space." "Do not let them," Taeho replied. "Now, remaining units, pursue and destroy. Show them that there is nowhere they can hide from human fire." The final phase of the battle saw human vessels chasing the retreating Void Swarm ships to the very edge of the system, their entropy weapons preventing the enemy from escaping back into their dimensional refuges. One by one, the ships that had consumed 17 star systems were reduced to glowing debris. As the last enemy vessel was destroyed, the combined fleet found itself staring at empty space where the seemingly invincible Void Swarm had been. The darkness that had threatened to consume the galaxy had been burned away by the fire of human determination. "This is Admiral Jinwoo to all vessels," came the voice over the communication channel. "The Void Swarm has been defeated. The galaxy is safe." In the aftermath, as rescue ships moved to collect survivors and assess damage, the alien representatives realized that their universe had fundamentally changed. The species they had dismissed as too primitive for civilization had just saved them all.